Hello, everyone, and welcome to the All Creatures Podcast. I'm Angie, and today I have a very, very exciting guest and close friend, an old coworker that I'm going to be talking with today about giant pandas. So I'd like to introduce Michael Brown-Palsgrove. He's the curator of Asia Trail and Giant Pandas at the Smithsonian National Zoo in Washington, D.C. Hello, Michael. Thanks for joining me for this morning cup of coffee.
Good morning, Angie. It's so great to catch up with you.
I know. It's so fun to obviously hear about your family, because Michael and I, of course, have been chatting for like last half an hour, and I said, well, we better get down to we
better get to the podcast.
Yeah, I'm almost through my coffee, for goodness sake. So we better actually talk pandas. But hearing about his lovely family and his newish life in Washington, D.C., because just a brief background, Michael Brown and I used to work together at a zoo in Chicago, the Lincoln Park Zoo, where he was a very big key in bringing me up as a young keeper and believing in me and even hiring me at the children's zoo.
Yeah.
I know.
Right. I remember you came in to interview, you were like waitressing, and you were like, I really, really want to start working with animals again. And to be able to just know I could see the passion and could hear it in your voice and knew that you had such great potential. And I was like, we need to get her on staff and get her started.
Yeah,
it was amazing, really, and it's so great to see how far you've come and all that you've accomplished. So
right, and it all goes back to having great mentors and people giving you a chance to get your foot in the door, and then going from there, and then reaching for every opportunity after that. Because then once we were working together, there was so much more room for potential or growth at the zoo that they supported at my level, of course, at your level. And I would like to say we both blossomed big time from from our early days.
I look at where I am. I'm like, to where I'm at today, thinking, the curator of giant pandas at Smithsonian National Zoo is like that dream job. Like as a kid, like thinking about, wait, you're going to work at this national zoo with such an iconic and charismatic species like the giant pandas that millions and millions of people watch these pandas on the Panda Cam, like all around the world.
Yes, I'm one of those millions, for sure.
I'm in charge, and I'm in charge of that program. It's amazing.
It's just incredible. And so, yeah, with that being said, so Michael and I, we go way back. So this is a very fun conversation for me to be having. But I have never worked with pandas, and so he is going to teach us a lot today about pandas and, of course, at the amazing program that they have at the National Zoo. But do you want to give the listeners just a brief history about your background and how have you always loved animals?
Yeah. No, so it's interesting because, I grew up going to zoos. I always loved going to zoos. And I grew up in Colorado Springs, Colorado, going to the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo there. And, it was at least a couple times a year we would go visit. And while I loved going to zoos, I never imagined myself working at a zoo. I thought I was like, I want to be a veterinarian, right? That's everyone's dream job.
Yes.
Oh, I'm going to grow up and be a veterinarian because that's what you do if you love animals. And it wasn't actually till I went to college and started really looking. I just went to McAllister College in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I had a really just basic biology degree with a biology study, sort of putting together prerequisites that I thought would be appropriate for veterinary school. But we had these seminars that we had different like field experts come in and teach. Mm-hmm. And at that point in time at McAllister, they invited in Ani Byers from at that time was the captive breeding specialist group out of Minnesota. And she came in to talk about zoo biology and all the biology that went on at the zoo. And it sort of changed like what I thought about zoos and where I might go. And so I still was thinking about being a veterinarian, but I got a job in the zoo, and I actually started at Cheyenne Mountain, the zoo that I grew up going to as a keeper. And from there, I just fell in love. And so I worked at Cheyenne Mountain for a couple of years, and then I went to Lincoln Park. In 1998, I started at Lincoln Park.
And so I must interrupt really quick.
Yeah.
One of my most favorite animals in the world Sichuan Takin by the name of Kubla Khan.
Yes.
I know he was born at the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo before he came to Lincoln Park and enhanced his legacy there at Lincoln Park. Did you know him at the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo? Were you there?
I was there.
What?
I actually
man.
was a keeper at that point in time, and I can actually remember going to I didn't work the hoofstock areas, but he actually was a surprise birth, and he actually spent some time down at the hospital, the veterinary hospital, and I can remember going to the veterinary hospital and meeting him when he was a calf.
Oh my God!
When he was like a tiny little like
furry.
calf.
And for the listeners out there that aren't familiar, we on podcasts we haven't covered Takins yet. That's Takin.
Wait, how?
I know it's so.
What, you haven't?
Well, so it's really funny or interesting psychology or something. A few of my most favorites, which would be the Grevy zebra, the Sichuan Takin, we haven't covered because I don't know. I don't know if I can do them justice, and I want to also try to get experts on to interview them to get people even more excited about them as well, and to complement the general species interview that we do. And so it's so funny that I just am like holding on to it, like I just don't know when is the right time. Now, however, we have done Bactrian camels, which is a huge favorite, and of course rhinos. And so I'm obviously the hoof and horn fan, but so. I promise you this, but yes, Sichuan Takins that are basically, for listeners out there that don't know briefly, they're like 1,000-pound Asian goat yak, gorgeous thing with like a golden flaxen brown color and cute little horns, and they're gorgeous. And as babies, so if you get to work with one as a baby, that might be that's in the top 1, 2, 3 cutest babies ever, I think.
Right. And we can relate it back to giant pandas because they actually do live in the same habitat and area as the giant pandas. So they are one of the actually species that are being supported by all the conservation work going towards giant panda conservation as well. So in saving lands for giant pandas, we're also saving lands for the Takins.
Yeah, well, and so that was going to be one of my questions. If you could maybe give us a brief background on pandas in the wild and the conservation efforts that have been going on in the past 20 to 30 years there.
Yeah, so it really is amazing because part of us bringing in giant pandas on loan from China is that we help support conservation in situ over there. And so a lot of what we do, the National Zoo, along with the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute, is capacity building in conservation in situ. So in China, and looking at, the landscape and the habitat that giant pandas are living in, and working on helping them conserve spaces. A lot of the research scientists that are actually associated with Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute have done extensive camera trapping and work in the range country and the ranges where they live to look at not only counting giant panda numbers, but other numbers of animals that live in that same habitat. And so thinking about, the giant panda as a really tremendous umbrella species that everyone knows a giant panda, but there are so many other species that are being saved because of this work. And so being able to know that if we're saving land for giant panda, we're saving other species as well. So I think that's just as important as the giant panda work itself. So.
Yeah. And now, go ahead.
I was going to say, and so a lot of the work that they've even done in the last 10 years, the IUCN has just completed recently another sort of population analysis of giant pandas, and they were recently upgraded or uplisted from endangered to vulnerable. So we're at over 1,800 animals now in the wild, and they're planning more conservation parks in China now, and they're beginning to explore reintroductions as well. So they've actually reintroduced, I believe, 9, and they've had 7 successful reintroductions of giant pandas back into habitat. And that's really the next sort of milestone or like direction of where they're going to be going with giant panda conservation is they're going to be working on reintroductions. So that's sort of, I manage the zoo population, the zoo work, but there's so much more beyond that that's going on over in China,
and that's like you touched on there, that the role that zoos have in conservation as far as rearing some of these animals under human care to learn more about them, learn more about their biology, their nutrition, their reproduction, their densities, their behaviors, all this stuff that will notably help scientists understand how to better protect them in the wild, how much land to conserve. Do they like to be next to each other? Don't they? How long do the moms stay with the babies? What kind of nutrition do they need? What do they eat? All of these things. And then, like you said, that the apex of that is not only learning about them when they're living under human care, but then reintroduction. And of course, there's several successful stories of that in the U.S. and in other countries. And yes, to have reintroduction of such a large, iconic herbivore? I'll let you tackle that one. Carnivore, herbivore.
Yeah. So they're essentially, they have a carnivore digestive system, but we call them obligate bamboo eaters. So they essentially sustain themselves only on bamboo, but yet they have a carnivore digestive system. So they have to consume such large quantities of bamboo to actually get the energy they need to sustain themselves. So that's probably why you see them sleeping so much, is because either they're eating or sleeping, as we say, because
that sounds like a wonderful life to me right now. But probably because of, like you said, being obligate bamboo eaters and needing a large amount of this plant, they probably, now that we know that, they probably need more land protected than maybe previously thought.
They do. I mean, they need very large, they move throughout their range throughout the year because they eat different parts of the bamboo throughout the different parts of the year, and probably across the elevations of the mountains as well. So we know from what we see in the zoo is that during the spring, they're really, they eat a lot of the shoots, and then they move it into the new growth of the plant, of the bamboo. And, then through the summer into the early fall, they're eating the leaves. But over the winter, then they're actually only eating the stalk of the bamboo, and they actually shred the stalk to get to the interior parts of the bamboo. And you sort of think about plant biology and where the energy is during different parts of the year. It's sort of where they focus their feeding ecology or their energy during that time of year. So in the spring, when they're putting all the energy into shoots, the bamboo, right. That's what they're eating, because that's where their most energy is. So if you're going to be dependent upon something that has so little energy anyway, make sure that you're eating the most optimal part of the plant during that time of the year. And that also has to go with elevation as well. Sure. Because they can move up and down the mountain throughout the spring. And as shoots grow throughout the mountainside, then they can eat that as well. So they definitely need large tracts of land to move through.
Yeah, to follow the bamboo. Not quite migratory, but in a semi-migratory pattern to follow where the energy dense food is. Yeah, that's really interesting. And those are things that luckily the panda, having so many people both in their home country and then here at the States fighting for them, that we're able to learn all this amazing information and then be able to apply it. And then we see the increase in numbers by the IUCN, which is obviously they're not out of the woods or the bamboo. Obviously they're not out of the woods yet. But it must be amazing for you and your fellow biologists and researchers and zoo specialists to have a win, or at least okay, we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah. I think to be able to see okay, we're increasing the numbers. We're starting to see some success with the, reintroductions. We see that China is putting resources and things towards saving this species. These are all really good things. Yes. And I think at least we know we're heading in the right direction for this species.
Oh, that's awesome. And so since you work so intimately with pandas on a daily basis,
Okay.
except for today, since Michael was so graciously to take his day off to talk with me. Thank you for that. Since you see them 5 days a week or so, probably more with the higher level role of your duties, can you give the listeners some interesting facts that we may not know or a lot of people may not know about them?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because 3 years ago, I never imagined myself being the giant panda curator at the Smithsonian's National Zoo.
I remember when I heard about, like, I either saw the Facebook post or whatever, I was like high-fiving, I don't even know, like you across the country, like, oh my God, that is so amazing. And
yeah, I mean, I knew very little about, about pandas when I got this position. I mean, I had worked with black bears pretty extensively at Lincoln Park because I worked with them, and I've worked with other carnivores and bear species, but I never worked with pandas. And so a lot of it I had to come in and learn. I mean, I knew from actually the year I applied for the job, they had just had our last birth at the National Zoo. So Bebe was born in
I love it.
Bebe was born in August of 2015. And so that he just turned 3 yesterday, actually was his 3rd birthday.
Aww.
We had a big celebration for him. So he is really a most loved panda cub. People from all around the world watched him grow up.
Happy birthday, baby. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I started, and, at the time, Bebe was still with Mei Shang, his mom. He was still like a 9-month-old cub when I started. I started in April of 2016. And just at that time, we still had his older sister, Bao Bao, at the National Zoo. She had been weaned and separated long before Bebe was born, and was living in our other exhibit yard there. And then also at the National Zoo, we have Tian Tian. He's our breeding male, so the father of Bebe and Bao Bao. So at the time I started, we had 4 giant pandas there, which is amazing to have 4 in one institution. So yeah, it's such an iconic. There's only 4 institutions in the United States that have giant pandas. So San Diego Zoo, the Memphis Zoo, and the Atlanta Zoo are the other institutions in the United States that exhibit giant pandas. We all giant pandas that are in the United States are here on loan from China. So they're owned by China, and so we each have our own agreement with China of what that means. So, but the National Zoo, we have our breeding pair, which are Mei Shang and Tian Tian. And then, we've been trying to breed them they came in 2000. And so we've actually had 3 successful births at the National Zoo.
That's incredible. I just got goosebumps.
Yeah.
Oh my word.
Yeah. So the first one was in 2005 was Taishan. So he was actually, it was amazing from what I hear. I have an amazing staff of keepers that work with me. My assistant curator actually has been working with the giant panda since Mei Shang and Tian Tian came in.
Wow.
And since they arrived and was there for all the births. So it's so great to have that.
The passionate keepers, expertise,
and then the passionate. I mean, I couldn't do my job, and I couldn't have learned everything I did if I didn't have my assistant curator, Lori Thompson, to show me the ropes and to teach me all about giant pandas. So, I mean, she's still my go-to for all my questions.
Yeah, she's like the guru.
Yep, she's the panda guru. So, but it's amazing because there's something about working with a species that is so charismatic and I would say universally loved.
I mean, honestly, yes. If you don't look at a panda and just see cuteness, happiness, feel love in your heart, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, right. They're just adorable.
It's funny though. They definitely are. But at the other end, you have to remind people that this is a
wild animal,
a bear, and we don't go in with pandas. So we maintain them and care for them like we do most of our other species. So they're protected contacts. So you would never see a keeper in with an adult panda. With cubs, there is cub management, and that there is a contact element with cubs. But once they start reach about a year, we would no longer go in with a cub. I mean, you think they can crush a 3-inch diameter piece of bamboo with their jaws. They have a tremendous jaw strength. So we know that they would be dangerous to go in with an animal like that. But
well, I imagine they have big canines?
They do. I mean, they're a carnivore, so they have canines and they have a jaw strength.
Yeah, you don't want... No, thank you. Yeah.
But on the other hand, they're also very, they work really well with the keepers. So they are really easily trained. We have them trained.
Okay, that was going to be one of my questions.
No, so we have
training and behavior.
No, we have an amazing panda keeper relationship, and they're able to do amazing things with them. So they are all trained for lots of medical behavior. So we can do voluntary blood draws from them. We can do ultrasounds, both abdominal and cardiac ultrasounds. We've done awake radiographs. There's so many things that you can do with them, and we have.
And just to remind the listeners, this is all through protective contact.
Yeah, we actually have built into our facility like sleeves that they'll put their arm out that the veterinarians can come and draw blood from. We use those same sleeves to like radiograph like wrist and elbow and other parts of the panda. So it really is all through this relationship that the keepers have built with the pandas that we're able to get this voluntary participation from the pandas.
So, are they intelligent to work with, or how is their...
They're motivated by different things. So like sometimes
they have personality, right?
They do. They definitely do. All our different pandas have a different personality. So, but I guess I probably am most, because of Bebe was so young and I have had more access to him. I probably feel more akin to him, but I sort of think of him as like a silly teenage boy right now because he's, an adolescent now. He, hasn't quite reached sexual maturity. So he's a little gangly and like silly at time.
Awkward
and still trying to learn, how to move through his environment. But he has such personality. So, he'll vocalize, like I'll walk through the building and he's waiting for his yard to be set up and he'll be sitting there and he'll like, sort of vocalize to you like Winnie, and he's like waiting for to go out to explore and to have his day. So it's amazing to have that access and to be able to spend time with him like that.
And to watch him grow.
Yes,
sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, all the different behavioral changes from being in a young juvenile toddling around to growing into pretty soon a mature individual. I bet that is just incredible journey to be on. Not only, like you said, for yourself, but for the millions of people that can obviously go visit the zoo, but then also participate on the National Zoo's Panda Cam. So that is awesome. And now, Michael, you actually fell into one of my favorite interview traps. And so you can always say no. But when you say, I love behavior and communication, some of my areas of expertise, when you say vocalization, because I have not had the pleasure of seeing any pandas, either, of course, in the wild or living under human care. So I guess I'm not familiar with their vocalization. So I didn't know if you could maybe give our listeners a preview of your best interpretation of a Bebe call.
No, I am horrible at impersonations, especially vocalizations. But, it was one of those things that I was not aware of about pandas.
So do they whine or bark or chuff or?
They do all those things. So they have a very wide repertoire of vocalizations. And actually the time that you see them most often is actually during breeding. So like during estrus and breeding, there's a lot of vocal communication, especially between our male and our female, that sort of let us know like when a female is approaching estrus. So it's one of the indicators that our keepers are looking for the approach of estrus and when we might know that she would be ready
receptive.
For either breeding, receptive and for breeding. And so there's a whole wide host of the vocalizations that really help us as indicators.
And so even the wine you don't want to just throw out. I can always edit it out.
I really cannot. I'm horrible. People would be like, "What is that? That animal's dying or something."
We need your panda guru. Well, no, I can maybe I'll splice one in. They'll be like, "Oh my God, he's amazing at it."
No, definitely, you can Google panda vocalizations, and there's so many. Yeah, there's quite a few different ones, but yeah.
Well, and it's just it's very fascinating to me to learn that they have all this different language, like you said, depending on if they're upset and they want to come in, or if they see, a con-specific, or if it's that time of year and they're ready to breed. So yeah, I'm sure there's a lot too. That's when with pandas living under human care, with the keepers and the staff and the scientists around them, it must be just so fascinating to learn about all of these things. That there's several animals, of course, in the wild that we know none of these. As I do this podcast, I just did one on the saola, the Asian unicorn hoofstock species. And I mean, we have no idea. I mean, of course it vocalizes and it communicates with its conspecific, but nobody knows. It's not been recorded. I can't even tease anybody to try to do an interpretation. And so I just think the panda is just so amazing and iconic that we do. I bet you just probably learn from it every day, I would imagine.
That's part of the amazing things and the things we've learned. A lot of it was about reproduction. So there's some really, really unique things about panda reproduction, and we learned so much about that, of keeping them at the National Zoo. So I mean, pandas, females only come into estrus once a year.
Mm-hmm.
They may be only able to conceive for a very small window, like 24 to 48 hours.
Wow.
And so there really is a lot of energy that goes into panda breeding in terms of at the National Zoo and in the wild. If you think about the communication that has to happen between a male and a female, because they're solitary. They live by themselves in the wild. And so the way that, so they're solitary in the wild. And so the way that a male and female would communicate is primarily through scent. So there'd be a lot of scent marking. And as a female is approaching peak estrus, a male would be following her, and then they would actually breed. So we also do the same thing at the National Zoo. So we utilize sort of the behavior, but then we also have a whole component of endocrinology that goes into it. So we have endocrinologists who are looking at estrogen levels and progesterone levels in urine that our keepers are collecting as we approach peak estrus, where we have keepers there 24 hours, and we're collecting every single urine sample so that we can time our artificial insemination when we think would be optimized, hopefully, conception at that point in time. So we have like science staff sitting in a lab waiting for each urine sample to run their analysis.
I want that job.
Yeah. So it's amazing. So it really is a nice, that's the one point in time in the year where we really have a great collaboration between endocrinologists and our reproductive scientists and our animal care staff, who all work together to actually hopefully produce day and night to have conception and hopefully a cub. So I've been through 2 estruses since I've been at the National Zoo in 2017 and 2018. Unfortunately, they were both unsuccessful and a cub was not born. But to go through the whole process of tracking the female, both endocrinology and behaviorally, and then planning artificial insemination. So we actually would we anesthetize the male, and we collect a fresh semen sample from him, and then we anesthetize the female for the insemination as well. So it's just amazing to get all those people around to do it.
Yeah, so. And I can't even imagine, obviously, how amazing that is, and how, like you said, the team of people that come in to do that and to help with that and to make it as most successful as possible. And then also, of course, when it's not successful, potentially taking notes and following the hormones and following the animal's behavior and trying to learn more about, okay, well, why, or how can we improve things? And I think that's probably, obviously, I I don't know a lot about pandas, but I've been able to participate a lot in semen collection and artificial insemination in horses. And it's a model between horses and cattle. It's a model that we know a ton about because we've been able to research it since they're domestic animals. We have a lot of access to it, and they're large. So
Right.
especially ultrasounding a horse and a cow is not easy in the beginning, but after you do it long enough, like hundreds of hours, like I have done, it becomes a lot easier, and then that's when you can really like study things and learn things about them. And of course, with such an endangered animal like the panda, you're only doing it, like you said, that one time a year. You're not able to, like me as a young graduate student, I could go out and ultrasound a horse every day until I got good at it.
Yeah.
And so it's a a huge learning curve that has made leaps and bounds, because you said there's been 3 cubs born at the National Zoo, correct?
Yeah, 3 cubs born at the National Zoo, and actually the XC2 population is actually at 520 now. So in China, there's over 520 pandas in sort of the panda breeding centers, and so that's part of it. It's amazing. So they too we've really perfected the science of breeding
That's awesome.
pandas in these great centers. And so it's amazing that where we've come in the last like 15 years with breeding.
And so now, are there any natural breeding attempts, or is it all through AI, just so you can, for listeners out there, I'm not sure Michael can answer the question about in the panda world, but I know like in the equine world or cattle world, artificial insemination is key, because then that way we can move the gametes, genetics, from one male who has desired traits or that we really want more of. We can ship it across the country and put it into a female, and they can have a baby that way. They don't actually have to like get together, right? There doesn't have to be any romantic music or any candles lit or anything like that. So I was just wondering, in the panda world, obviously artificial insemination seems to be the route to go, but is natural breeding ever used, or is that just not the main model?
Well, they use it a lot more in China. We've not had a successful natural breeding with Meishang or Tian at Smithsonian National Zoo. Part of it is we really have to wait till the behavioral indicators line up for that.
Exactly.
And then also knowing that if we wait and let them attempt naturally, we might not get an adequate sample from the male if we have to go through
following the other steps.
Yes, following. If we gave them an opportunity to breed naturally, but then if they never were able to successfully breed naturally, then we might have lost our opportunity to obtain a fresh sample from him.
Right, for artificial insemination.
So it's a lot of, you have to weigh the costs and benefits. But definitely in China, there are proven natural breeders, and I think it's especially important in thinking about reintroduction. You want to know that if you put them out there, they're going to be able to breed again naturally, right? Because out in the wild, there isn't going to be the management of artificial insemination. So they've done a lot of research. They have a much larger number. We have one breeding male, one breeding female, but they have 500 animals over in China that they're working with, and so they've actually done a lot of research, and that's part of in our collaboration with our Chinese colleagues is looking at those things. So I know they've done a lot of research on male-male competition is actually somewhat important in terms of successful natural breeding, and is knowing that there might, and mate choice for females, like that they actually have a choice between 2 males, where we just don't have that at ours, where capacity. We have one male, that capacity, we have one male, one female. So those are all things that are great. But I mean, once we go through the artificial insemination, then we continue to track the female all through would be potential birth. So it's interesting because another interesting aspect of panda biology is they're delayed implanters. So
Cool.
So after you've had what you would consider to be conception, there's a long period of time before the embryo would actually implant in the uterus and continue development. So after the sperm and the egg meet, they just sit sort of in stasis until they implant into the uterus and continue development. So they actually, while it's hard to explain, but their gestation can have such a wide range of time because it can sit there. It can be I've seen up to 300 days for a true gestation from time of insemination to birth. So that's why it's important for us to continue to track the female all through that period of time. So we continue to collect daily urine samples that are analyzed by our endocrinologist. And so what we're waiting for is what we consider to be implantation to sort of start the countdown for a birth. So we're looking for what we call a secondary rise in progesterone. So that's generally what we know is that the uterus is getting ready for an implantation. And then we sort of could know that we're within the window of when we might expect a cub. So it's, they're amazing creatures. And then on top of that, female pandas go through what we call a pseudo pregnancy as well. So both endocrinology, so their hormones look like they're pregnant. So we see that secondary rise in progesterone. And then behaviorally, they act like they're pregnant as well. So they'll go into a denning mode. They'll go and start building a nest and act like they're pregnant. And then all of a sudden, one day, like their progesterone drops back down to baseline and they get up and walk out of the den and never give birth. So while it's really great to have like the endocrinology tracking and us tracking behaviorally, really the only true way we can confirm pregnancy is actually through ultrasound. So if we were to see a cub developing, but they have such a short window that they actually develop because they're born really small.
Yeah. So once the embryo is finally implanted in the uterus, then they technically are only growing the panda cub for 70, 80 days? No,
40 to 50 days only. Generally 40 to 50 days.
40 to 50 days. Yeah. I mean, unless you were ultrasounding them frequently, and let alone the size, they start off very, very small, and they're actually born pretty small too, considering that they grow into giant pandas to large pandas. So I imagine on ultrasound, it's not being an experienced ultrasounder myself. I imagine it's probably not the easy, even if they're trained for it. I probably imagine it's a really difficult job. So kudos to your veterinarian and keeper staff that do that, because I can't even. That's got to be a tough job.
Yeah, no, as we're approaching the anticipated birth window, we're ultrasounding them twice a day. So we're pulling them. We have a space built into our facility. We call it the training cage, where we have ports built into it.
Okay.
So we have ports built into it so that the veterinarians have access with the ultrasound probe. Our keepers lie the panda down, and then our veterinarians are ultrasounding them generally twice a week. The really other sort of thing that impedes our opportunity or the access to the panda for ultrasound is that they get really spacey, or sort of they're hormonal, and their hormones and behavior is driving them towards denning, and they're spending a lot of time in their den and getting ready for birth.
I know about pregnancy hormones. Trust me.
Right.
I can only imagine. Yes. And we, with my friends and some of my mom Facebook groups, we call it mom brain. So,
and pandas get that as well. Definitely.
Pandas get mom brain. Who knew that? That's awesome. So I love them even more now.
So she's not food motivated at all. It's not like there's any.
Now that I can't relate to. My husband probably wishes I was more like a panda during pregnancy. He doesn't mind the spaciness, but yeah, going out for food runs late in the night, primarily frozen yogurt with lots of toppings, is not his favorite task. So interesting. So they go off food, or they're not as food motivated.
Well, they're not food motivated. They actually go off food, and pretty much they're denning. So they're spending time in their den, getting ready. They're sleeping a lot, and getting ready for birth.
Isn't that just a fascinating, from a physiological point of view, that when the female panda's body the embryo is finally implanted, and now it's time for the embryo to grow, so it needs nutrients, and that's when the mom pulls back food to spend more time preparing it a nice, soft, safe place to be born, and that her body is able, obviously I would assume without really knowing much about panda physiology, that she must be drawing from her fat reserves or something in order to help grow that panda. That's incredible.
I mean that's one of the great things about delayed implantation as well, is so they would know, like, they've sort of reached a certain threshold of probably fat reserves and like
that must
dietary like that they've hit this point nutritionally where they feel like they could support a pregnancy and a birth. And so it is advantageous to have that delayed implantation. So it's been a good year for bamboo, and bamboo's, the shoots and they've eaten well, and they're
green and yummy. Yeah.
Yeah. And they've done a great job, and that's when they would implant and continue that. Wow. So, I mean, there is a lot of evolution. I know.
It's so incredible. And that, of course, you and I studied this in books, many years ago but then now you get to like watch it unfold on a daily basis. That is so cool, Michael. And so once a pregnancy is confirmed through ultrasound, what does your staff do to help prepare for a panda birth? Because this is not obviously any birth is exciting, of course. I mean, who doesn't love any birth of any animal? But I would imagine especially since it's on loan from China, I would imagine this is what I would, this is like a superstar, giving birth. This is the, I don't know, Angelina Jolie giving birth type of like, oh, all eyes are on you, right? Yeah. I would assume. I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but I would imagine that of course it's a big deal. It's a panda, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
So how do you and your staff kind of prepare for that? Or if you can walk me through a little bit what goes on behind the scenes there.
While I've not been at the National Zoo for a panda birth, we have a whole mechanism of things that we do to prepare. So we actually close down the panda house and we sort of turn it into a quiet zone. So we want to give her as much privacy and quiet as possible as she's preparing for her birth. And then we actually also work with our colleagues in China to identify nursery staff from one of our sister sort of panda breeding centers to bring out. So, I mean, they have way more experience dealing with cubs than we do. And we sort of organize and collaborate to try to bring out staff from there as well, nursery staff who are more China. In tune. Yeah, from China. So we bring over staff to help us should we have a birth or twins, because that is the other issue, is that not issue, but the other thing is they just won't give birth to one. There is a possibility they'll give birth to two. So twins. We do know from history that generally in births of twins and pandas that only one cub will survive. Mm-hmm. So we have to be prepared for we'll always have two. And so part of that is to get people to help us with that process. So.
Wow, that is just incredible. I mean, that's just so incredible. And then you come in there and then you get to watch the baby grow up. They stay with, and then once they're born, they're going to stay with their mom for a while. Is that correct?
Yeah, generally they're about 18 months of age before they're weaned. Okay. So they usually stay with mom through the whole first year. And as generally, they notice this also in the wild, as they're approaching breeding season of that second year, is when they'd leave mom. So by the time breeding season reaches the second year and the cub's about 18 months of age, they would leave mom. So so we weaned him when did we do that? That was in March of 2017. Okay. He was weaned and moved into his own exhibit yard at that point in time.
Okay. Aw, and can you tell me just a little brief, just because I have such a cool picture of Bebe in my mind. So what does he do? What's he do? Does he just like climb on things all day? Does he roll around? I mean, I know he probably eats and sleeps, but I imagine since he's a juvenile, he's probably a little more playful.
Yeah, so he does a lot of climbing still as a juvenile. So he spends a lot of time in the trees in his yard. So generally, our keepers start around 6:30 in the morning, and they come in, and the first thing they always do is we have this amazing facility, and especially set up with Panda or with cameras. We call it the Panda Cam, like operation room, and we have you think about like the NASA. You think about the NASA operation room. We have a room with like 3 widescreen TVs, and then we have like all these other like views because we have 41 cameras set up across our Panda facility.
Man, I love it.
And so they come in, and that's the first thing the keepers do is they find all the pandas on the cameras, and they spend a little bit of time watching them from overnight in their indoor enclosures, and then they do a little bit of record keeping and start their day, and then they go out and set up the yards for the pandas, and they go out and they take the bamboo and, set up different enrichment for them. So part of, while they only eat bamboo, we know that at the zoo, we also support them with other food types. So they get produce. So they get sweet potatoes and apples and carrots. And then they also get a primate biscuit as well. So another like leaf eater type
high fiber,
a high fiber biscuit, and that's what we use in the enrichment. So like balls and spools and other things with holes that we put the biscuits in. So they actually have to work to get their job, because in the wild they would be covering a wide area and working to get the bamboo, and so we want to duplicate that, and so we make them work for their food a little bit.
You make that Bebe work.
And he definitely does. He loves his balls and his other things. The thing that he loves most actually are tubs. He'll sit in tubs. So like if you ever notice in his exhibit, there's always something for him to like sit in or sit on, because he would love, like, you can imagine him lounging in a bathtub, like, because we'll put a giant tub in there and he'll just sit in there and he'll grab his bamboo and sit there and eat it and chomp on it, just relaxing in the tub. So that's one of his favorite things is his tubs. So.
I love Bebe. I'm going to have to come by and see him in person. That's for sure. But for our listeners too, that maybe aren't obviously, or if you're in the Washington, DC area or anywhere near, if you haven't yet, oh my gosh. Obviously, if you didn't already love pandas after listening to Michael describe some of their amazing behaviors and unique adaptations and their just how generally fun they are to watch, definitely go to the zoo and check them out. But there's also this Panda Cam you mentioned.
So if you go to the Smithsonian's National Zoo website, we have Panda Cams, and we always have 2 pandas on view 24 hours a day, all night long as well. And then you can visit us like remotely as well, or over the internet. So it's amazing that we're able to share our pandas worldwide.
Right. So I can just be on the bus bored and watching Bebe in his mock bathtub eating bamboo and just chillaxing.
Definitely. Yes, you can.
That is awesome. And now, and you said that obviously just go to the Smithsonian National Zoo website. I'm sure if you just Googled Washington Zoo, or
probably the easiest way to find our pandas is if you go and Google Panda Cam at National Zoo, you will find them very easily. Awesome.
And of course, the National Zoo has a Facebook page, which I'm sure is filled with amazing updates. I know I like them on Facebook and Twitter. I'm not into Instagram yet. I need to get there. I just, I'm not. I guess it's just my mom brain. I feel like I'm too busy and overwhelmed. But I recommend most normal people do Instagram. So I'm sure they have an Instagram page as well, where you would get amazing photos of not only the panda family there, but of course all the other brilliant and amazing animals at the National Zoo. And now, Michael, thinking back to your time in college as a young budding biologist, and then of course you took the leap of faith to work at the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, and then at Lincoln Park, and then now at the National Zoo. What advice can you give to somebody that wants to get involved with some kind of conservation, perhaps pandas, right? To follow in your footsteps, or just any animals in general?
I mean, I think for me, and in looking at candidates and people that I want to join my team is practical experience. So whether it's an internship or you're volunteering at a zoo, I think is probably the first avenue to really get involved. Many zoos have a volunteer program or an internship program, and that's the way that you get your foot in the door. My first job at a zoo was actually in horticulture. I took care of plants. That way I could get to know the animal care managers and really show that I was, show my work ethic, because I think, and just show my passion, like that I was willing to do something else just to get my foot in the door. And, but yeah, so sort of practical experience. I mean, coursework is always important, but I think any sort of practical experience that you can get through your college, whether it's a study abroad or a semester abroad and working on a conservation program or Earth Watch trip or anything like that, where you can show, that this is the career that you want to do, and making those initial steps into conservation.
Awesome. And now for listeners that, of course, a lot of our listeners are animal keepers or conservationists that are in the field and loving the field, but we do have a lot of listeners too that just love animal biology, behavior in general, but they may have a different career. What could the average listener do that isn't able to or isn't either able to have a job or volunteer in an animal field? What could they do to help the giant panda conservation, both overseas and then also here too in the United States?
I mean, I think the number one thing is to visit your local zoo. I think zoos are doing amazing conservation work. They're really working all to save species. And so I think that you can make a really big impact by just supporting your local zoo and the programs that are near and dear to their hearts. So at the Smithsonian National Zoo, Giant Pandas is one of our major projects, but your local zoo is doing really some great, maybe small local conservation projects as well. They're just as important. So I think your local zoo is a great avenue to show and to support conservation.
Awesome. And I must ask my last question, one of the most important questions. Just kidding, not really. Would you hire me again?
Right away. No doubt. It was one of my best.
There was a little pause.
No pause. Well, you're overqualified now, though. That's the problem.
Oh, stop it. That is completely untrue. As you're talking about the late nights watching the pandas 24 hours, I'm like, I want that job. I would do it for free. I shouldn't say that on air.
No, I that's one of the things that I've actually enjoyed most about my career is actually seeing the success of other people that I've worked with, and where they've gone and the things that they've accomplished. I think I get sometimes more joy to see other people's accomplishments as much as my own.
Well,
I mean, to know.
Yeah, I think it's actually a reflection of you and our time together and some of our other colleagues of just, I mean, we've got to have coffee every morning and talk shop, of course, talk family and friends too, but know that we're in the right setting, doing the right things, young in our careers. The world theoretically is our oyster if we just work hard enough and work together and keep learning and growing. And then you meet people like yourself, like me meeting you and some of our other great colleagues along the way. It's like a support network. And then you have these people that support you to reach out and attain your dreams or do things you're kind of scared to do. Like it was probably a little scary for you to take this job with such a high profile, iconic species that you had, like you said, you hadn't worked with. But you had great mentors and of course, not only at the Lincoln Park Zoo, but then, like you said, then you got into the National Zoo and had the best staff ever that just took you under their wings. And that's what we do. We support each other. So, yeah. Oh, cool. Which is why you were so graciously agreed to take your morning off to talk to me. And I just really appreciate your time. And I appreciate your career and what you've done, obviously for the panda, which is what we focused on today. But I know Michael way back. I won't even share our age for how many years, and the amount of species that he's worked with and helped, and not only the species, the animals, which of course are a huge part of it, but Michael is a huge educator. And so the amount of students, co-workers, voluntary staff, docents, just everything that is very passionate in, and everything that you're just very passionate about, teaching people and helping people understand how amazing, obviously the panda, but other animals are to conserve and to learn about and to love. And so I just want to thank you for your service to both animals and then and to people, and keep up the good work. And this was so much fun. I'm going to bother you again soon to do this coffee conversations about pandas. And since you are at the Asia Trail at the National Zoo, I'm sure there's plenty of other species we could pick to have conversations about as well.
Yeah, it's been amazing catching up with you over. I think the conversation over coffee this morning is great. I mean, I think it's the best way to sort of catch up with each other and to talk about the giant pandas and the amazing work that Smithsonian National Zoo is doing, and that the other institutions in the United States and even our colleagues in China. So it's great to be able to talk with you and educate you a little bit about giant pandas today. So,
oh yes, definitely. Well, listeners, I'll add some links to the show notes, of course, the Panda Cam, but if you haven't already Googled them as we're talking, check them out, and the website links will be on our show notes, and you can learn more about these fascinating creatures, because Michael and I just touched on a few of the really cool facts about them. So anyways, thank you, Michael. Stay in touch and give that Bebe, blow him a kiss for me, because I love him very, very much.
Well, thank you so much, Angie.
Awesome. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.